Welcome to another episode of 365 Brothers. Today's guest is a man who has a commitment to having people live their best life. He does that through two professions. In one profession, he's a pastor, a preacher, and so he guides his flock, and it's more than just delivering the gospel. It's making sure that they are equipped with what they need to live a fantastic life, a life that's full. And the other occupation is as a teacher, and specifically teaching social skills, focused on the kids who have certain issues that have come up in school or in their educational setting. And so he pours into them what they need so that they can get the most out of school. So this is Darius Davis. Welcome, Darius.
Hey, thanks for having me. I also coach, by the way. I previously coached football, basketball, and track. This year, I'm not doing track. So married. I've been married for 6 years, but I've been with my wife for 12. We actually met on her 30th birthday. My current wife is actually my second wife. I married young. The first marriage, I was slated to become the pastor of the church that we were attending. My mom and my dad were co-pastoring a church that they founded in Austin, Texas. And a woman latched on to me. I fell hard in love with her. Did not realize that she was only interested in me for the prestige of being a pastor's wife.
Yes, that happens.
It happens. I got licensed in 2004. And in 2006, I was on track to be ordained. But what happened is I had a traffic ticket in Williamson County, and we people know this. There's certain counties in certain states where it's like you don't want to have a ticket there. Austin is a blue dot in a sea of red, and had a traffic ticket that I couldn't afford to pay. And if I was in Austin, you make a payment plan, you're good to go.
Yeah.
But in Williamson County, it's like give us all our money or go to jail. I didn't have the money. I didn't want to have that hanging over me. So I opted to just sit and just serve the time for the ticket. Wrote a letter to the governing bodies of our congregation explaining my decision. They said, well, because you went to jail, it's because you embarrassed the congregation, you're not allowed to preach for 6 months, and your ordination process has been reset, so you won't be ordained until 2008. I resigned. So we ended up leaving. Long story short, so we were on our way to San Antonio. I had a speaking engagement at the Church of God in Christ Church in San Antonio, and on our way there, got pulled over for a routine traffic stop. My tail light was out. No big deal. Don't get off with a warning. But when he ran my license was suspended. So here's what happened: when I served the time for that speeding ticket that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
At that time, that was the beginning of them doing surcharges. I don't know if they do that in California. So in addition to the fee that you had to pay for a ticket, there was an additional charge. I did not know I had a surcharge. When the surcharge wasn't paid, they suspended my license. So I'm driving around thinking that I'm free and clear. The officer walks up and he was like, Mr. Davis, do you realize that your license is suspended? I said, no, sir. And so that was go straight to jail. Like I almost didn't make it to my speaking engagement.
So what did he do instead?
They took me to jail, but because of my then wife told them I was a preacher, I was headed to speaking engagement. They were able to get a judge out to get me magistrated quickly, so that I was able to get released on my own personal recognizance. I was able to make it to my engagement the next day, but I had a set court date that I missed.
Oh no!
How I ended up serving time in jail was I was on my way to get my inspection sticker done. Got pulled over by an officer. He was like, "Do you realize your inspection is out of date?" I was like, "Yes, sir. I'm actually headed over there right now." He ran, my stuff. There was a bench warrant for me for missing the court date. They held me for 60 days for a missed court date. Now, this is county jail, so county is 2 for 1. So the actual sentence was 120 days.
When they released you, when you served for the original ticket, They didn't tell you anything.
No, completely unaware, because I would have taken care of that immediately.
There are a couple documentaries. One of them is called Plea. It was done by Frontline, and it's just about how the ticket, the charge, the first thing is just the beginning of a loop that keeps people in.
It keeps you in the cycle.
And so it's just, as I hear you having that in the background, that knowledge, it's like, so this is another way that you find yourself stuck in. And I know that for some people listening to this, it's going to seem like, oh, come on, that there must have been something. You must have just missed it. You obviously didn't hear.
Yeah.
You know, this is not, this actually happens, and is sometimes very much on purpose.
To that point, I mean, so I had a period in there where basically, you talk about, the criminalization of Black bodies. I actually posted something on Facebook where the criminalization of Black bodies that makes it, in their mind, okay to either kill us in the street or kill us in the system. To have us just completely locked up and locked away. And the majority of us don't know our rights, or they find ways to disinform, not necessarily misinform, but disinform us, so that we're not aware of what's really happening. And if you don't have the resources, right, for an attorney that really advocates for you and can fight for you, that court-appointed attorney is not going to do anything to help. They are court-appointed. It took me a while to recover, and that was just for a minor. Imagine if a minor traffic. Imagine if it was something more than that. I mean, maybe we're not sitting here having this conversation.
I thank you for sharing that. So tell me, what's your favorite song right now?
The one song that every time I hear it, it does something to me is For Every Mountain by Kurt Carr. It's, for me personally, it speaks directly to my life. I've experienced deep wounds. So to think about that song, For Every Mountain, like, I've come over some mountains. I've been through some serious things that on the face of it, to some people, doesn't seem that serious. But when you start to dig into how it wounds the soul, then you're like, oh, wow. Outside of that, born in the 80s, child of the 90s, give me some old school hip hop, I'm straight, for sure. And some good R&B, where the songs actually, we're talking about something. Even though I'm a preacher, I'm a cussing preacher. Sometimes I might cuss at you, right? I'm not gonna sit there and lie to anybody, And so, catch me on the right day, and you might catch me listening to C Murder and Master P.
Okay.
So, I'm just saying, it's not gospel all the time. That's right. It's not gospel all the time.
So then, child of the 80s.
Yes.
Growing up in the 90s. What is a favorite childhood memory?
One thing I remember when we moved to Austin, I've always been athletic, so one of my favorite memories actually is when my mom came to Bowie High School, where I went to school, during the Black History program. She was our featured speaker. She had just released a book of poetry called In Search of Warriors, Dark and Strong. It was her very first publication. And she came, and I just remember just being very proud to be her son in that moment. And she clowned me. But a good roast is to me, imitation is a great form of flattery. I can take it. My only thing.
Do you remember what she said?
So she has a poem called Jocasta's Lament that's about me.
Okay.
And she read it in front of all of the whole school. Okay. But there's a line in the poem, where she talks about, I remember in first grade, you said, I have 100 girlfriends. And everybody's like, yeah, right. And like, just this big, roar of laughter, just at the thought that I would say I had 100 girlfriends. Of course, now my closest friends like, yeah, I can see that. I can see him saying that. So,
that's funny.
I can't, like I said, favorite memories. I just have moments, right? When I first moved to Austin, I sang in the opera. I was in the Austin Boys Choir, and of course I was 7, so I was singing second soprano. Don't ask me to do that now. Where I sang the whole thing in French. Can't speak a lick of French now, except for
Yeah,
we.
how old were you?
I was 7.
That's a great lead-in into accomplishments. I want to know for you, what is your favorite accomplishment? And then the second part is, what accomplishment is the one that others are most impressed by?
So my answer is going to be the same for both parts of that question.
Okay.
And it is going to be getting my college degree, getting my bachelor's, and also being ordained. That all happened in the same weekend. I went to school straight out of high school, was not prepared. I was not prepared for life after high school. My first stint in college, I failed. I went to UT Dallas straight out of high school, failed, and ended up coming back home to Austin, kind of lived life, went through various things, including first marriage, all of that, and was realizing as I was getting older that I was missing out on a lot of opportunities because I didn't have my degree, even though I had more sense, more common sense, and even more knowledge than most of the people that I was getting passed up for. You have to have what's necessary to get your foot in the door. And quite frankly, being a short Black man has its own things, going on with it. It has its own challenges and also benefits in other ways. But we'll talk about that more when I talk about police. Needless to say, I eventually went back to school. I went back when I was 31 years old, got my degree, finished out in 2015. So May 2015, I got my BA in psychology with a minor in religious studies. And that very same weekend, I was finally ordained. Just after all of what it took to get to that moment. 2006, I was supposed to be ordained. It didn't happen. And then really losing my first wife because I wasn't ordained. When we finally had the conversation, come to find out that the reason why she fell out of love with me is because I wasn't ordained and I wasn't on track to become the pastor, and she fell out of love and wanted out of the marriage. Losing a marriage, feeling like a failure. And so just being able to get to that point where I was finally ordained, it was a sense of validation. There are people that recognize me and value me in this area of my life. Because really, ordination is really all about what people see about you and say about you. It has nothing to do with who you are personally. Sometimes those two things can intersect, and you can make those things about you like, well, I'm not ordained, something's wrong with me. No, that's just been people just don't see what you see in yourself, or what God sees in you, whatever.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like I said, getting my degree, just finally being able, to upgrade my life because I have something of substance that says to people I'm valuable. Because I've been so used to being discarded. So okay, I will dig into it a little bit. I'm short. I'm 5'4". When you're short and you do things to stand out, the immediate thing people go to is Napoleon complex. Oh, you're showing out. You're trying to make yourself be something you're not, right? And so you spend a lot of time, with your head down, because you're fighting those perceptions that you're trying too hard. You want people to see you, because as a result, you get often overlooked. You may have something of real value to add to a conversation, but you can't speak up, because if you speak up, you're trying too hard. And if you get frustrated, you're the angry Black man. Now you really got a Napoleon complex. That's why those accomplishments matter, because if nothing else, it gets me in the door.
What words motivate you, inspire you, or are just the most meaningful to you?
Linda Ravenhill, there's a quote by Linda Ravenhill that I like. It says that opportunities of a lifetime must be seized within the lifetime of an opportunity. It's a reminder not to be slothful, right? On the other hand, it's like, well, how many opportunities have I missed out on because I didn't move when I had the opportunity to move, or when I should have moved, But I like that quote. And then the other one is a throwback from my grandma on my mother's side, Bernice McKinney Bridgman. She used to always say, people going to talk about you no matter what you do. So make sure you make it worth it. Make sure they talking about you doing what you want to do.
I was well in my 30s before I figured out that, people going to talk no matter what. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to worry about that. They're going to talk about me. I can just concern myself with what I'm doing, and then they can talk about what I'm doing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there a moment, an event, a conversation that either changed the trajectory of your life, or if it didn't change it, it stands out as like one of the most meaningful moments of your life?
So right before I went back to school, I was depressed. I mean, my divorce was final when I was 28 years old. I'd just been kind of going through the motions because I was in a deep, deep depression of definitely feeling insignificant as a person. And I remember talking to my mother. She gave me a call just to check on me. And she said, well, what is your next move? What are you going to do next? I was like, well, I don't know. I don't have any opportunities, out here. So I'm just kind of taking work wherever I can get it, mostly manual labor stuff. I was working in a warehouse at the time. I remember my mom saying, well, why don't you think about going back to school? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I can't go back to school. I messed up my transcript at UT Dallas. She was like, but you've been out of UT Dallas for more than 7 years. Maybe you can start over. And just the idea that I might be able to start over was enough to be like, let me look into this. That particular moment was influential because it just put the thought in my head. I don't think I would have even considered that as an option if that statement was not made. And it could have been anybody. It just happened to be my mother. So that was a significant moment that I would say changed the trajectory of my life, because I was definitely on a downward spiral.
It's amazing how a single statement in the midst of a conversation can have that impact on us,
Yeah.
And I thank you for sharing that, because what I also love about that particular conversation and moment is, especially because it was 7 years, and there's just something about, there's so many things that expire after 7 years. There's like right. Foundation on that, and then they talk about the 7-year itch. It's just like it's the opportunity to recycle. And I'm not saying people have to wait 7 years, but it's right, awesome right. that that she said that, and that you were like, yeah, okay. And right. I hope people listening to this particular episode, if there's someone who's going, I've already messed it up, it's done, that they also get it's only done because it's done, and done is in the right.
past. Done is in the past. What you gonna do now?
Exactly. Thank you. Throughout this conversation, mm-hmm. we couldn't help but talk about the experience of being a Black man in America. Right. But I'm also curious if there's a moment or event that highlights for you what it is to be a Black man in America.
So this is an interesting question to respond to, because for me, I've never experienced, except for one time in my life, the overt reactions to my Blackness.
Yeah.
That one time that was actually when I was 6 years old. You talk about a she bear with her cubs. My mom went off on this lady. I'll never forget Miss Purvis. Miss Purvis, my first grade teacher. Now you had to do something serious for me to remember you. So Miss Purvis, I was gifted and talented, and Miss Purvis, I was off the walls because I finished all my work and whatever, and I was like, I need something to do, and she was like, sit down, you little nigger. She called me a nigger. First grade. Now here's the thing. Now you have to understand something. I had never heard that word. I'm in first grade. The teacher called me a nigger at school, and I never heard that word. So I go home, like, guess what the teacher called me today? Guess what the teacher said? My mom said, what? So she called me a nigger. My mom said, what? And, the rest is it. The rest
okay, so wait, hold up. Wait a minute. Okay, first of all, What year was this?
So 86, 1986.
86. See,
I was first
86,
grade.
I was already in college. So I'm sitting here going, that happened. What? Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, secondly, so you hadn't heard it. So I just, because the listeners can't really see your face. So I just, so when you went home and you told your mom that this teacher called you that, you were saying it like it was.
I was saying it just like telling my parents about my day. We did debrief, right? So every day I come home, what y'all learn today? What y'all do in school today? So I'm like, well, we were doing this and this, and Miss Purvis called me a nigga. Like, I mean, it was like just normal conversation.
Right.
Like this is,
and she called me purple.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like it wasn't, there was no offense in my expression because I never heard the word. Why would my parents teach me about that by the time I was 6? So needless to say, we watched Roots the next day. That whole weekend, we watched Roots. We watched the whole anthology, right?
Okay. So what did your mom do?
So I got quickly educated. And because of the kid that I was really smart, and I loved to argue with teachers, and I had a mouth on me. I knew how to cuss. I didn't know the N word, but I knew how to say bitch. I didn't know nigga, but I knew bitch.
That's hilarious.
So I ended up getting in trouble because I went to school when I found out that what she meant when she called me a nigga. I said, bitch, don't you ever call me a nigga again. And got called to the principal's office. They called my parents, and whatever. But yeah. So, but
that is hilarious.
That's actually very funny.
It is funny.
That was the only really overt experience of racism that I had. Being a short Black man, I'm not as intimidating as other Black people. Now I'm dark. If I was short and light skinned, they'd probably be like, oh, he's safe. I'm the safe Black, right? But because I'm short, I don't deal with overt aggression. I deal with microaggressions. Microaggressions. The same way that women have to deal with, white women say, can I touch your hair? White boy come and, like palm the top of my head or something. It's like, man, get your hand off of me. Like, why do you think it's okay for you to touch me? If I was 6'8" and my name was Tyrone, you wouldn't even walk up to me. I'll give you a very recent example. I was in a meeting with a parent of one of my case kids she's a pain in the butt. But anyway, she made a statement that was very, very untrue. She made a statement about how we run the program that it was clearly a misunderstanding. And I just wanted to correct her understanding. And literally 3 women in that meeting, and not to point out that they're women intentionally, but they just were women. As a matter of fact, 2 white women, 1 Black woman, they all shushed me. I'm 40 years old. I'm a 40-year-old man. You see what I'm saying? I'm a 40-year-old man. And I'm getting ready to respond. And literally in the meeting, in front of this parent, they shushed me.
You mean all 3?
All 3 of them. Consider this. Again, now you have to talk about microaggressions. If I assert myself, I'm the angry Black man.
I get it.
And if I don't assert myself, then I have basically given credibility or even permission for that kind of treatment of me. So this is, as a Black man, these are the kind of precarious positions that we get put in, especially in professional settings.
Yeah.
Right? There are other factors that play into this. I really do believe this with all my heart. It's not my age, because I'm full grown. But if I were 39 and 6'5" and wanted to say something, you wouldn't have shushed me, right? And I specify that because when you talk about the multitude of experience among Black men, Blackness in conjunction with other factors has to play in.
Absolutely.
If I were white, they wouldn't have shushed me for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But you felt safe doing it because I need to control this black man. And I feel like I can because he's 5'4".
Yes. What I am present to as you share that is how we're just constantly sizing each other up. Do you know what I'm
Yes.
saying? And
Yes.
you know, there's a word that's coming out now that people are becoming familiar with, intersectionalities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how, you know, I'm black, I'm a female, but I'm educated, so then that gives me something. But then if I come out in sweats, right,
Right.
then I get a completely different treatment than if I show up all dressed up into the nines.
Right.
All these different things add up, but it all relates to the same thing, which is I'm sizing you up to see, are you here, are you above me, are you below me, and then I'm going
Right.
to treat you accordingly. But it's like, why is it that we as a society, because black is just one thing that gets sized up, it's just one thing that gets sized up,
Right.
that's the focus of this podcast. But
Right.
beauty, we already know there are studies that say if you're considered attractive, you get more deference, you get better
Right.
service, all of these things. And
Right.
so
Absolutely.
there's this obsession we seem to have with sizing up and determining based on outward appearance
Right.
what kind of treatment someone is deserving of. You know, and I
Right.
appreciate you pointing that out about the intersection of, you know, there's being a black man, and then there's being a black man, whether are you 6'8" or are you 5'8", you five
Right.
six, all of that. So
All of
yeah.
that comes into play. Right. Well,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And so, yeah, my experience, like I said, is mostly microaggressions. Because of how those things intersect for me, I deal with a lot of microaggression, and to the extent that oftentimes I have to just decide not to respond to most stuff because I'll be responding to stuff all day, every day. Man, subconsciously and unconsciously making decisions related to how I know I'm going to be perceived. So, like my choice of dog. Well, do I get a Rottweiler or do I get me a little mutt? Right? You know, it's funny to think about, and it seems absurd, but I know I'm not by myself. I grew up middle class. I grew up with both of my parents, who were educated, pastors. We didn't start off middle class, but because of their education, their acumen, and all that, I was middle class. And even though we didn't live really nicely in my early life, we never lived like we were ghetto. I mean,
I
if that makes
understand.
sense.
Yes.
And I graduated from Bowie High School, but I actually started off at LBJ High School, which LBJ was all black, predominantly black school. I was there because I was in the Science Academy. I started out at LBJ and quickly realized that everybody that's my color isn't my kind. They were like, who are you? I didn't grow up in their neighborhood. I had a very different experience. My very first day of school, I'm in the Science Academy where you do what all students do. You're gonna sit with people that are familiar, that because you're trying to navigate a new setting, you try to get to any familiar space you can, before you venture out. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the familiar space for me were the students that were in the Science Academy with me that came from my middle school, and none of them were black.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm the Uncle Tom, because there were other black students that were in the Science Academy, but they went to the schools with the other black students that weren't. So we know you smart, but you the Uncle Tom, you're not even from our neighborhood. What are you
Wow.
doing here? So I had a
Yeah.
banana peel thrown at my table the very first day of school by this kid named Chris, who was a blood, and me being Don Davis's child was like, and I picked it up and threw it back at him. And and of course, all my little white friends were scared. Why do you do that? But he was like, man, I ain't no punk. Like, we don't. I don't play like that. And sure enough, him and his two little cronies walked up and, you gonna throw that pill at me? And I stood up and I was like, yeah, Fortunately, I ended up not getting in a fight in the cafeteria the first day of school because his friends recognized me for playing basketball.
Okay.
And so they were like, wait, that's that little nigga that played ball at Better Check. Oh man, nah, dog, we nah, cause I have a reputation. I'm tough, like
Right.
I was strong. I had a reputation for being tough, and like we could tussle. So they left me alone. But then I also had to kind of look around the corner. I had to watch my back, because he was in a gang. He was a blood. And he was looking for opportunities for me to show that I was either isolated or signs of weakness so that he could take me out. Now, this is an interesting thing to talk about because you talk about experience as a Black man, not only when it comes to microaggressions from whites, but also even microaggressions from within. The fact that I didn't fit into their definition of Blackness. So now I'm not fit. I'm not fit to be around. I'm not fit to be respected because I didn't fit into that definition of Blackness. I didn't come to school sagging my pants and, in all the latest fashion. I was striving to make straight A's, things that don't fit into the mainstream concept of Blackness, because we've let white A&Rs who work for hip hop labels define Blackness for us. So my experience of being Black not only relates to the racism that you encounter, but even sort of the infighting.
Yeah, it's a concern about being too Black on one hand, and then there's not being Black enough on the other.
I'm sure you've heard of Makad Brooks. He's an actor. I actually grew up with Makad Brooks. His mom worked with my mom at the Austin American Statesman, and she said it most beautifully when one of our friends passed away. She said the difficulty, the struggle of being a Black mother is raising your children Black enough to be accepted, but white enough to succeed. Dang. And trying to navigate that world, trying to be successful in a white world, knowing that if I'm too successful in a white world, that
yes,
I may be rejected by my own. And so then you end up creating an entire subculture, and then you see how it plays itself out sometimes, even in the current civil unrest. While we're all on the same page about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Rashard Brooks and Trayvon Martin, the list goes on, and the unnamed, the people that never got on video, right? Yeah. We're all on the same page about that as far as how we feel. We're angry. We're, all of that. We're shaking our fist at the sky, at God. Like, why does this keep happening to us? And yet at the same time, I got in probably one of the biggest arguments of my life with a Black woman who was mad at me because I was arguing that about the fact that white nationalism, how it's crept into Black thought in a lot of certain ways. And she was saying that the issue is racism. And if you can't agree that the issue is racism, then we can't talk. Then I'm like, we're on the same team.
Yes.
Just because I'm approaching from a different vantage point does not mean that that I disagree with you, or two, that I'm not on your side.
Yeah. Inside of that, I'm going to skip the law enforcement question because I feel like we covered that. If the U.S. were a woman, however you want to place her, what would you say to her?
What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why don't you love? Why am I not enough? Why am I not good enough for you? Yeah, I just leave it at that.
Okay.
I mean,
no, go ahead. You got something to say. Go ahead.
I say that not only with respect to my own personal experience, but I think that also intersects with what I would say to America as a Black man. What's wrong with me? When it comes to dating, I did look at this question in the context of dating. When it comes to dating, people have personal choice, but oftentimes, as I said, people get overlooked, for a variety of reasons. And sometimes it's like, dude, you don't even realize I'm the best thing you'll never have, right? You're missing out on something great in your life because of how you disrespect me. You don't know what you're missing out on. You don't know what you're losing because you won't respect me as an individual, as a man. I have so much to offer that would enhance you, that would not necessarily make you better, but would add to your life, that would bring value to your life, just as you bring value to mine. But you treat me like I ain't worth nothing. And then got the nerve to get mad when I look somewhere else.
Mm. Mm. Okay. No, I felt that one.
Felt that?
I felt that one. I felt
It's
that
true
one.
though. It's true. You
Yeah.
won't give me the time of day. Full disclosure, my first wife was Black, right?
Mm-hmm.
My current wife is Dominican.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had women say, "Oh, you just don't like Black women." No, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
I love Black women. I love all women. But I love Black women. But Black women don't love me. The one that I thought loved me loved the idea of me, not me. Because if she loved me, it wouldn't have mattered if I was a pastor or not. We'd be together. You can't reject me. And then because I have a desire to love and be loved and find that in another, then to say that's the problem. And America's the same way. You know, you mistreat us, you do us wrong. We finally have enough, and some people have taken to the streets, and they're doing more than nonviolent protesting. And I already know that all the looting is not coming from us. That there are anti-Black racists out there who are stirring this stuff up. But there's also a significant portion of us who's like, we've had enough. Fine, that's how it is. You know, or you can't have it both ways.
Speaking of, what is love to you?
Baby, don't hurt me. What is love?
That's pretty good.
First of all, I think love is action. It's action. I really believe that. You know, throwing on my preacher hat for sure. You know, love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. Love doesn't boast. It's not proud. It's not rude. It doesn't seek its own. And you know, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. So in all of that to say, it's action, right? And it's choice. You know, I demonstrate my love, and I choose to love you. Showing genuine love to somebody is when you choose to love them after they hurt you. Not being hurt and be like, oh, I love you so much. Yeah. And your desire for them. But when you've been hurt and wounded, which is going to happen when you let people close, it's inevitable. If you genuinely open yourself up to somebody, you will inevitably be hurt. And most times it's not intentional. But when it happens and you commit and you stay anyway and you love anyway, and you're able to say, you know what, you did that and that did hurt me, but I recognize that you did that because this is where you are. That's showing real love.
Okay. Is there anything about you that we haven't covered that challenges the stereotype of Black men? I mean, you've shared some already.
I've covered a lot, yeah.
Yeah, but is there anything that you want to add?
I think I pretty much covered it, right? I mean, yeah, I pretty much covered it.
Okay. Then the last question is, now that we've actually had this conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you're now present to or that you've discovered from being in this conversation?
It's not so much a discovery as it is a reinforcement of what I've already thought and felt over the years. And that is, one, that Blackness is not a monolith. Black maleness is not a monolith. There's a range of experience. And there's, like you said, intersectionality within those experiences that leads you down certain paths. While I know and believe that people are predisposed to certain environments and certain activities, I do not believe that people have to be subjected to those things. Does that make sense? You know, I may have a predisposition towards alcoholism. It doesn't mean I'm going to be an alcoholic, right? Some people choose not to drink, right? There are a lot of people that grow up in the hood, have drug dealers all around them, have never touched a drug in their life. Right.
So with that,
this was amazing.
Thank you. First of all, I just loved getting to know you in this conversation. I acknowledge the level of thought that you have obviously put into these issues and the experience of being human.
Yeah.
And when you share yourself, your love of humanity is obvious, and your depth of reflection on what gets in the way of our being fully self-expressed and fully realized. And just your having that background, that knowledge, that reflection, it allows you to contribute so much more in a conversation than would otherwise be available. So thank you for that, for being who you are.
Well, thank you. That means so much. It really does. I appreciate that.
Thank you for listening. As you can hear, you do not want to miss any of these brothers. Make sure you subscribe. You can find more at our website, 365brothers.com, 365brothers.com. This is Robin Shine. To listen is to love.